One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
All right.
Welcome to Security Guy Radio, sir. What's your name?
Scott Morrison,
And Scott, what's the name of your company?
IDVSolutions.
What does IDVSolutions do?
We help organizations take command of risk through command center software.
Now, I was I was at Anaheim, I think, last year.
That's correct.
And looked at your software. I think this is one of my favorite products of all time, right? And I'll tell you why. There are a lot of ways to get information in multiple places, but you put it all in one place.
Yep.
It's like the center of the universe.
Yep.
I mean, everything's happening in a local area, and you're translating data into a visual medium that's easy to understand for a command center person. And I just think it's amazing. So tell us about, the background, how it came to be, and kind of where you are with it. And you got some new features for the product too, right?
That's correct, Chuck. Thanks a lot. And yeah, you're right. What we try to do is bring together a lot of complex data and information about an organization and bring it into a more intuitive way to be able to use that information.
Intuitive, that's a good way to describe it, yeah.
And we do it in a command center environment. And so we're excited because at the show, we've announced the release of our newest version of our platform, Visual Command Center 5.0. And what we're really doing with this technology is helping organizations transform their command centers. A lot of command centers have been heavily invested in, but they don't always deliver on the promise. And so our goal is to help our clients transform their command center into a strategic asset for their organization.
That's a great way to look at it. So I've designed a couple of command centers and participated in it, but we're going back, you saw my white hair, right? We're going back a few years, and our highest tech was we had digital video recorders, wow, before anybody else had them, so I could have some camera feeds and door alarms. That was it, and some phone calls. Come a long way since then. Tell us about the information that is now fed into a typical enterprise level command center.
Well, Chuck, information is a really good way to talk about it. And very often when we walk into a new command center that we're just beginning to work with a client, what we see is a wall of monitors. So certainly there's a lot of technology there. But what we see on those monitors is often a lot of noise. So we see television news, we see the Weather Channel, we see desktop applications that really weren't designed to be on a large wall. And that really creates a lot of noise. And it's hard for analysts and operators to understand what all that information means, and does it even impact my organization?
It's a lot of raw, unfiltered data.
That's right.
I mean, I'm watching 5 news stations, so what am I going to do with that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, television news is the thing we most often see on that wall, and that's really the worst way to try to get information about risk events, because it's really accidental discovery. So you may happen to see a story that might impact your organization, but if you aren't watching the screen at that time, you may miss that story. So it's really not a good way.
And news feeds often take their news from like Associated Press, who writes the original story, and 5 news stations copy it. Where's the new news in that, right? So outside source of information to verify what's happening, multiple sources is the best way to do it.
Yeah. So what Visual Command Center is doing is really re-architecting all of the information that an analyst or an operator sees. And so it's still important to bring in all of that data about risk, but you want to bring it in a way that doesn't rely on the analyst or the operator to have to understand it all themselves. So we let technology do a lot of that. And instead, Visual Command Center brings together all of the assets and the information about an organization's footprint, combines that with the information about risk events, and then only lets the operator or analyst know about something that they actually have to worry about. And that comes in the form of an alert.
Now, are the alerts configured by the end user? In other words, they filter out, I don't need to see hurricanes in Los Angeles because I'm probably not going to get one, or that sort of thing. But I'm really interested in person-on-person crime. I'm not interested in white-collar crime. That doesn't impact my business, right? Can they bring it down to that level about what they see?
They can. The alerts are tailored towards, first of all, do they impact my organization?
Right.
And then they can be vetted by the analyst before they're actually released to other stakeholders in the organization.
All right, so this is a giant global enterprise level sort of fit. Are you finding that you're called upon by the enterprise C-suite to implement this? Does it come from the top down, or is it still kind of coming from the security director up?
Well, actually, it's both.
Okay.
So oftentimes we begin working with the security organization, usually a GSOC manager, GSOC director that rolls up to the chief security officer. But what we find is that there are many, many stakeholders to that command center. And so, as I said earlier, trying to make this command center strategic means putting it in the center of a company's operations.
Good point.
So those stakeholders could be people in operations, they could be people in HR, they could be the C-suite, because ultimately, many, many people throughout the organization are stakeholders in a company's reputational risk, in their security, and making sure that their organization is risk resilient.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Disney, they Pirates of the Caribbean called us up and said, we want to go film here, and we said, no, probably not a good idea. We had to find that data through a lot of sources and a lot of time and a lot of effort, whereas if I had this, I could bring the guy into the command center and say, see that map? Yeah, see that island right there? You see all the crime? You see the hurricane? You see the tidal wave? Don't go film down there, right? It really crunches and compresses your time to respond down to seconds or minutes.
Well, and Chuck, that's a great point. Time is the one thing that is crucial when it comes to risk management.
All about time, yeah.
And so time is really not your friend in that respect. Our experience is that the more time you have, the more options you have, and the less expensive those options tend to be. So we're trying to compress that time to be able to act in a meaningful way based on a particular event.
How scalable is this? Let's say I just want to know about crime in Las Vegas. And how many feeds could I put in here? How much information could I feed into here?
Well, the platform scales up and it scales down. So most of our clients that deploy this technology are Fortune 750 size companies.
Sure.
But they have an asset footprint, all over the globe.
Globally.
And so they need to know what's not just what's going on overseas in the Middle East and in Europe, but they need to know what's going on in a locality. So, down at the office level or at the facility level. So they need to know what's happening with an active shooter, with terrorism, with civil unrest. All of those things that happen in a very close proximity are also important.
Yeah, the world's too small now. And something that happens here is impacted across the seas. And your reputation can be impacted if you as a company don't respond quickly and properly to that kind of thing. Now, any big brother worries? Do you ever get pushback like, well, if I put my trucking company in here and I tracked all my truckers, we're going to say we're trying to make you safe. They're going to say you're trying to catch me doing something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The more we get into technology, the more information we have, more concerns people have about it too.
Sure, but the rewards certainly more than outweigh those concerns, and more people are comfortable with types of technologies that are tracking, what's going on in the world as well as where my operations are.
Now, what are some new perks you put into it this year? We're going to take a look in a minute and do a demo, but tell us what you've kind of upgraded. I understand you've brought in. Help me out now. Activist organizations, right?
Since it's a unifying platform, we're always looking to add more and better sources of risk data. So as an example of that, we added activist data with our partner activistmap.com. So we're bringing political and social activism types of events into the platform. Social media is also becoming a more and more reliable source of risk data. And so we partnered with a company called Geophidia, who's also at the show.
I've interviewed them. Great company.
Yep. And we bring in their data. So we're adding more and more connections to the platform. We also, and that's really on the assess side. So we have alert, which I talked about earlier. Then we have assess, which is okay. Is this a threat? If so, what do I need to do about it?
I was going to ask you about that. It's now that we have the data, it's almost overwhelming. How do I make a determination if that is a threat? What are the analytics involved? Is there some automated analytics with your platform?
Sure. So our framework is alert, assess, and act.
Okay.
Alert really tells me if a risk event is in a proximity to an asset that I care about.
Right.
And those assets could be fixed assets like buildings, facilities, retail locations. They could also be mobile assets. They could be traveling employees. They could be executive protection. They could be, if you're in supply chain, it could be a truck or a container that's moving from a distribution center out to a retail center.
Right.
And so that's part of the alert. The assess piece comes in. Once I know I have a problem, now I have to realize what's the extent. So at that point, I know I have an incident. I may want to look at social media. I may want to look at weather. I may want to tap into traffic cameras or CCTV. So that's part of understanding the situation. It's like having boots on the ground without having to be there.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of that is act, right? If you just alert and assess, but you don't act on it, then you're really not being very effective. So to do that, we integrate with other companies like Everbridge, who is another one of our partners, for mass notification. Or we integrate with Risk 360 from G4S, which is an incident management system. And those systems are really designed to take action and to manage an event once we know about it.
So, how do you determine who gets the alerts? Is that just a policy, an internal policy? How do you get the how do you determine who gets the alerts?
Well, so
we have data coming in. Now we have to push it out.
That's right.
And one danger or risk in that, and by the way, I always say this all the time, that the greatest risk to your security is your security, right? Because we have a great system here, but we have to get the users to push it out in a way that doesn't make everybody go crazy and overreact, right?
Yep.
So how do you handle notifications and levels and things like that?
Well, and those are configurable. They're often by the risk type. So for example, if there was a hurricane or a tornado, we would want to immediately let the
everybody
impacted
know about that.
employees know about it. Other events, we may want to vet first and have an analyst look at it, make a determination before we release that alert to the broader audience. So it depends upon the type of asset, it depends upon the risk, and it depends upon the situation.
So let's say I'm in Burbank. Burbank's got a great PD. I know the chief, he's a great guy. It's a great community. And I'm the big studio down the street, and I have this product. I'm at Disney. And I want to say, hey, chief, can we work together on this? Can I get some feeds from your dispatch center in real time, not public information, but stuff that's going to impact the 7,000 studio employees I have here? Because if I can make that work better, it helps you in a crisis, right?
Sure.
So can we put in private feeds or individual feeds, or I don't know if that makes sense, encrypted feeds, that kind of thing?
Sure, and our risk feed architecture is very flexible and open, and so in situations like that, we would work with our clients who might have the relationship with local law enforcement or another type of risk source to figure out how to bring that into their instance of visual command center.
That's great. How do we handle encryption and the bad guys trying to get it and all that stuff? Because everybody's concerned about that.
Sure. Well,
because they're public feeds, right? But does the information come in front of my firewall or behind my firewall?
Well, so there's two different ways Visual Command Center can be deployed. One is on-premise, and one is in a hosted environment.
Oh, okay.
Both of those environments are secure, and we're never exposing an organization's information out in a way that would be exposed to the public. So we bring in data, but we're not exposing their organizational data out.
Yeah, see, here's what I'm thinking. I'm a bad guy. I want to find out what's going on with your company. I can make an analysis that what you're interested in tells me what you're doing internally. Even if it's a public feed, right? The fact that you take 100 public feeds or you take 10 public feeds tells me what your business unit's focused on. So these are mostly public data feeds, correct?
Some are public and some are private.
Okay.
Yeah. But
if you host it on your server, then of course that's just a peer-to-peer connection, that's secure. But you're saying that they can actually host it on their own server and use it there. Is that correct?
Okay. Yeah, but none of that information is known out to the public, so all of that stuff is kept secret.
Just thought I'd ask.
Yep. Appreciate that.
All right. What are some other new features you've come up besides the activist store?
So we have really a new architecture for the product. So this version of 5.0 is being released using HTML5.
Oh, good.
And so you may say, what does HTML5 mean and why do I care? It really allows us to take Visual Command Center and deploy it in a number of different browser environments, different form factors like a tablet or a mobile device.
Oh, good.
So it really provides a lot more flexibility. We believe that the information needs to be given to the appropriate level of information to the appropriate people at the appropriate time, really designed around the jobs to be done.
Right.
And so you have to deliver that information in a format that individual, that stakeholder, can best consume.
Talking about the mobile version, is that used to push data out to first responders?
No, mobile is really just used to inform people out in the field about a potential risk event, where they're not in front of their computer or in front of their monitor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can they go in and monitor on a mobile device? If you gave permissions, could I look at this map on my phone or my tablet?
Yeah, because of the complexity
It's
of
smaller,
the information, we would recommend that really doing that on a tablet as being the smallest type of a form factor.
Yeah, I'm traveling, I'm the CISO, and I brought my giant 21-inch screen laptop. Can I log in and take a look there?
Sure.
Okay.
Because Visual Command Center is accessed through a web browser, and so you don't have to be in the facility. You can access it really from anywhere, just using a browser.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Can we take a look at some live action stuff? All right.
Yeah, sure.
Let's take a look.
Okay.
All right, Scott, welcome back from our little break. Here's your map. This is what a typical command center would see.
Okay.
This is what a 60-inch monitor, but if you got a 100-inch monitor, that's even better.
Sure.
You can throw this up in the command center. Very easy. It's kind of hard to translate through our GoPro here, but it's very clear. And by the way, if you're listening to the podcast, go to YouTube and you can see this.
Yeah, so the general layout of Visual Command Center is, again, a lot of this is map-based, so that's the visual part of it. So you want to see where your organizational assets are. And so those could be anything from buildings to warehouses to manufacturing. And so there's a variety of different types of those assets that we can bring in. So the next thing that you want to do is you want to understand the risk to those assets. And so that's where risk sources come in. And we're bringing in a variety of different risk sources, both from public and private data.
Right.
They range from anywhere from political unrest to crime to terrorism to weather events to hazmat, a variety of different risk events.
I could bring my HR data in here if I wanted to.
You could.
I just terminated this employee. Everybody knows about it. He's a risk.
Well, we bring in HR data to know employee locations in some cases, to know where people
Evacuations.
are, or to know where they're located and which of their offices. The key is that when we combine the risk data with the asset data, that's where the alerts come into play. And so in this scenario, there are 49 alerts.
Let me move the camera a little bit.
Sure.
I want to see if we can zoom in here and take a look at that. What the end user's looking at. Let me switch places with you.
Yep.
Go ahead. All right, so here's our nice looking menu. All right. So tell us what we're looking at.
So there are 49 alerts. Now there are more than 49 bad things happening in the world right now, but the reason why there are only 49 listed here is because 49 of the thousands impact assets that we care about. And so as we scroll through the different alerts, all of these are active risk events that are impacting either a location or a traveler or someone, maybe a field team member, but they're part of our organizational footprint.
Now, is this a real feed?
So the risk events that you're seeing here are real.
Yeah.
They're happening in the world. The asset data is not. That's really for demonstration purposes.
Of course, right. But
so
real data feeds of risk. Interesting.
That's correct. So there is really a power outage going on. There are really issues happening in New York, in the United Kingdom, in the Philippines. All of these things are.
So there's a tweet about something interesting. Yep. Power outage. Very good.
Yep. So
news articles. What else am I looking at here? Source data.
Okay, so we're picking up data from a variety of different sources. We're picking them up from things like, we do pick up information from Twitter. We pick up information from International SOS. We pick up information from Global Incident Map, breaking news. Really, whatever types of risk data sources that we can get access to, we try to incorporate into the platform.
It's very easy to use, very nice, easy interface.
Yeah, and so the idea is that once you understand that there is a risk event, the next thing you want to do is understand what the impact is. So if I click on this particular risk event, I see that I have 9 assets impacted.
Oh.
One of those is a building, and 8 of those are field team members.
That's amazing.
So the next thing I would want to do is I would want to understand more about that risk event. So I could fly to that item, which if you look at the map then goes into Seattle, and now I get almost an on-the-ground view of what's happening there and what are my assets that are impacted by that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So,
and an asset is represented by these, let's say maybe these blue things, or?
That's correct. So this is a field employee, for example, and I have a building in this location. So as it said, there's 1 building and 8 field team members. So the next thing that I would want to do is begin the assessment process.
Right.
So for assess, I might look at social media, I might look at traffic cameras, I might look at if you have video on your building, I might want to start to see as if I was there but not having to be there. I would want to see what's going on. And then if indeed it's determined that this is a risk event that I need to take action on, now I need to notify the infected employees.
Right.
So I can notify them from a number of different ways, but the most typical way is to integrate with a mass notification system.
Okay.
So in this case, we're integrated with Everbridge, who is also at the show. So I would click into Everbridge, and I pre-populate. I already know who the main contacts are of the people or the things that are impacted. So I can very quickly send out a message about this risk event to those employees, and I can click on the ones that I want to include.
Oh, that's interesting. All right.
And then I won't do this, but I could send out a mass notification informing them of the issue.
Now, here's a question I have. What type of setup is involved in this? Because you have to pre-program your employee data, put your assets in. Give me an idea what that takes. I assume you guys help with that.
We do, and the setup's a lot less complicated than you might think.
Okay.
Because what we really need to do is, and this goes back to what I said originally, is that really to make this command center strategic, you've got to be at the center of your organization. And that means connecting to those data sources, those systems, the people, and the processes used in risk management. And so we initially will set up connections to those data sources about your assets, about your travelers, and then we'll be constantly bringing that information in on a regular basis. So the initial setup really doesn't take that long. I mean, we can have somebody up and running in, let's say 4 to 6 weeks for the basic implementation.
Right.
And depending upon the complexity of what else they're going to integrate in, that could add time. But we can get somebody up and running relatively quickly so that they can start getting the advantages of Visual Command Center.
Right. Does it have any AI component where it kind of learns, I don't know, things, maybe not artificial intelligence isn't the right word, but can I configure it to say, listen, if I get 5 alerts for this thing, this crime, then I'm interested.
We
Threshold monitoring, I don't know.
That's really a level of analytics that we don't do.
Okay.
The intelligence really comes in the alerting engine, knowing when to alert based on a risk event, based on a type of an asset.
Because the risk event's in proximity to your asset, that's the whole key.
That's correct.
Okay.
Everything's really based on geospatial rules.
Yeah.
Knowing where things are and understanding what's your threshold of proximity for a particular risk event.
Now, I know you're not going to give us a quote here on Security Guy Radio, but I happen to know offline basic pricing on something like this. I find it incredibly reasonable. I thought it would have been 100 times more expensive. Is it a subscription basis? Is it a yearly basis? How do you price that?
It is. So it's done on a subscription basis.
Okay.
Again, it can be deployed either on-premise or in a hosted environment, but it's on a subscription basis. And you're right. When you think about the value of your brand that you're protecting, the value of the risk of loss, then the investment in something like this is more than justified.
Right. Now, do any insurance companies give big corporations breaks because they're mitigating the risk, aren't they? Substantially.
And that's really a good point. And we don't have any specific quantifiable data, but we have heard anecdotally that organizations that deploy this type of technology are looking at whether or not this could potentially change their risk profile, which could ultimately.
I will say
impact
this:
their insurance.
we had Lloyd's of London, Hiscox, I think it was at Disney, and I used a service out of England for intelligence. I'm telling you, I got a discount on the insurance in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think probably this would, and this is even better than what I used to use, right? So I think that would be something that would offset any cost you have.
That's certainly something we could. We should ask our customers about.
No, I would, because I think it is significant. How am I going to pay for it? Well, you're going to get a 25% discount on your $1 million policy. Boom, it's paid for, whatever, Well, Scott, this has really been fascinating. I like the upgrades. I like how it keeps growing. I like this new component for the political part, because really, I mean, this year in America, that's a problem.
That's right.
And I'm more worried about that than Al-Qaeda walking into the store and shooting everybody. That will happen too, I get it, right? But really, most of the time your threats are internal.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that is a constant, is that risk never sleeps. And it seems to be more and more on the rise the more we hear about it. And so we're just trying to help organizations take command of that risk.
Right. Well, Scott, thanks for coming on Security Guy Radio. I really appreciate it. And where are you off to next? You'll be in Florida?
We're going to be at As Is.
All right, I'm going to come
Orlando.
see you. I'm going to see what the latest upgrade is.
We'll be there. We're looking forward to it. Thanks,
for
Chuck.
coming on the show.
Yep, thanks.
That was great.